Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a little different.
That's right. We're stepping away from the usual studies and articles to look at a really personal account shared directly by a listener.
Yeah, this one comes from a YouTube channel, actually. It's a first-hand story.
And it's quite incredible, frankly, a bit unsettling, too.
Okay, so let's unpack this. It's about a listener's childhood. They had this really severe illness, the kind regular medicine just couldn't fix.
And that led the family to visit a spirit medium.
Right. Then there's this sudden, almost unbelievable recovery.
But it doesn't stop there. Following that recovery, the narrator describes a really terrifying first encounter with, the supernatural.
An encounter they say had lasting effects on their whole life.
So our goal here is just to explore this narrative as it was shared. We'll follow the sequence of events, the reported impact, sticking just to what the source material tells us.
And here's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? How does an illness that seemed incurable just disappear overnight after something that wasn't medical?
Exactly. And what are the consequences when something like that happens? Does it open doors?
Let's start at the beginning. The story kicks off when the narrator, who used the name Kungun, was in elementary school.
Just a kid.
Yeah.
And they describe being hit with this really severe, persistent illness.
Not just a cold or something minor. This was serious, causing a lot of worry for the family.
And like you said, conventional medicine wasn't working. The account mentions 2 weeks of medication, no effect.
They even tried doctor's injections, apparently. Still nothing.
Right, the child didn't know the exact diagnosis, which makes sense for that age. But the point is, science in this story hit a wall.
And there was this other layer, too. Apparently, there were these observations, maybe prophecies.
Yeah, the narrator mentions that even before the illness, some Buddhist monks and fortune tellers had apparently told the family this child had a destiny involving spirits or negative entities.
So this idea was already kind of floating around in the family's awareness, this connection to the spirit world.
Which must have felt suddenly very relevant when the medicine failed.
And the parents had different takes on this stuff, right?
The father was described as a strong believer, very into the mystical, the supernatural.
But the mother, she was mostly skeptical, believed in science, karma maybe, but ghosts causing physical illness, that was hard for her to accept.
So with science failing, and maybe thinking about those prophecies, the father decided, okay, let's try something else. Let's look into the occult, the mystical side.
And he specifically chose a spirit medium, someone he trusted, recommended by a friend.
Understandably, the mother wasn't keen. The source says she really pushed back at first.
I mean, taking a really sick kid to a medium, you can see her point. She thought science would figure it out eventually.
And she saw these mystical things as more psychological comfort, maybe? Not actual cures for serious physical problems.
Plus the practical side, traveling far with a sick child.
Yeah. But despite all that, her skepticism, the arguments, she eventually agreed.
Lack of options, I guess. And the father's persistence.
Exactly. He apparently framed it like, look, this is the last resort. We try this once. If it doesn't work, I won't push this kind of thing again.
Okay, so that leads them to actually going to the medium's place.
Right. The journey itself is described from the child's viewpoint, remember. They're sick and tired.
They went in a pickup truck. The father, his friend, and the child left around 6 p.m.
And the kid mostly slept, didn't really notice the route or where they were going.
They end up at this place, described as being on the outskirts of Bangkok. It's nighttime, but the compound is all lit up.
The source mentions seeing 2 big spirit houses outside, trees around. The main building itself just looked like an old, ordinary house.
Nothing spooky from the outside, then.
Not really. But inside, the atmosphere, for the child at least, changed completely.
They were told straight away by the adults to crawl forward towards this big Buddha altar.
And there's the person sitting there, dressed in white robes. The medium.
Imagine being a sick kid crawling into this strange, very quiet place. The narrator describes feeling this immediate pressure.
Goosebumps, too. Just inexplicable goosebumps. Said the air felt heavy.
And then the medium starts talking. At first, apparently a normal, warm voice talking to the adults.
But then, according to the account, a drastic change.
Yeah. What happened?
The voice becomes harsh, loud, starts using old-fashioned, archaic language.
The narrator saw this as the medium entering a trance, right, or being possessed.
That was their interpretation, yeah. It's a common element in stories about mediums that shift signals something else taking over.
And it wasn't just the voice. There were other weird things happening.
The child heard faint sounds like an elephant trumpeting in the distance.
An elephant, okay.
But maybe the weirdest part, the most unsettling detail, was the sound from the floorboards right under the medium's chair.
What kind of sound?
Loud cracking, creaking noises, like someone incredibly heavy was suddenly standing or stepping right there.
Wow. So the implication was a sudden, massive increase in weight, hundreds of kilos maybe.
That's how the narrator perceived it. Imagine being that kid, hearing the floor groan under some invisible weight.
While all this is going on, the voice, the sounds, how was the child feeling?
Terrified and physically stuck. They described feeling frozen, couldn't move, couldn't cry out or scream, like being held down.
Just paralyzed by fear, shaking, wanting to run, but physically unable to.
Absolutely terrifying, especially when you're already sick and vulnerable.
So then the actual ritual happened. What did that involve?
The narrator described it as something like a Krab Siang ritual.
Krab Siang. What does that mean, typically?
It's a Thai term, often for ceremonies where a headpiece is placed on someone or their head is covered. It can symbolize getting a blessing or an initiation, sometimes inheriting knowledge or a spiritual connection from a teacher or a deity.
Okay, so in this case, the medium chanted and put some kind of headpiece on the child's head.
Right. The child didn't know what it represented specifically.
And how did the ritual end?
The medium seemed to kind of black out for a moment, then came back to normal. The narrator saw that as the spirit or deity leaving.
Okay, so ritual over, they take the child home.
Yeah, the father and his friend took the child straight back.
Right.
And this is where the story takes that really astonishing turn.
The recovery.
Yes. The immediate aftermath was, well, almost miraculous, based on the account.
The very next morning after getting home, the child wakes up.
And they're completely, the severe illness they'd had for weeks, gone.
Just gone.
Totally gone. Full of energy, ready to play outside like nothing had ever happened.
Wow. After weeks of sickness and failed treatments, that speed, that completeness, that must have been huge.
Absolutely. The source says this sudden, unexplained recovery really shifted things for the family's beliefs.
Both the child, obviously, but also the mother, the skeptic.
Especially the mother, yeah. Despite her strong skepticism before, seeing this happen apparently made her seriously start thinking that maybe these supernatural things, these mystical forces, could be real, could have tangible effects.
You can understand how something that defies explanation like that could change your perspective.
Definitely. But the story, as Kungun tells it, wasn't just about the recovery. Soon after getting back from the medium's place, the first clear supernatural encounter happened.
Okay, this is the really chilling part.
The father came home late one night. He'd been at a funeral.
The child was asleep in bed between the parents. Father lies down next to them.
And then the child starts to wake up, but feeling suffocated, finding it hard to breathe for no clear reason.
That sounds awful.
When they managed to get their eyes fully open, they saw something terrifying. A large male figure standing there.
What did it look like?
The description is really vivid. Greenish-purple skin, bloated like a corpse, bulging eyes.
Oh, wow. And where was it?
This is the part that's deeply disturbing. It was reportedly standing on the child's chest with one foot.
On the child. But looking where?
Its attention, its focus, wasn't really on the child, it was pinning down. The narrator says the figure was staring, like really intensely, with visible anger, visible resentment at the father sleeping right next to the child.
So the anger was directed at the father, but the physical pressure was on the child.
Exactly. And the child's reaction, just pure terror. And again, paralysis.
Couldn't scream.
Tried desperately, but couldn't make a sound. Felt like their mouth was covered.
And trying to struggle.
Yeah, but the figure apparently just pressed down harder. The child felt like it was trying to step over them to get to the father.
Oh my God. That feeling of pressure, suffocation, feeling like you might die.
Truly horrific for anyone, let alone a child. But then the mother intervened.
She was nearby, awake.
Maybe stirred by the child's distress, or maybe she just sensed something. The account says she reached out, grabbed the child's hand really firmly.
Did she say anything?
She reportedly said something, but the source doesn't give the exact words.
And that was enough.
Apparently. That touch, maybe the sound of her voice, just cut it off. The vision, the physical sensations, everything stopped immediately.
Just like that. Wow. Okay, so what happened the next day?
The child woke up later that morning, still feeling well, no longer sick, and the suffocating feeling was gone.
Did they check the room?
First thing they did, looked around, the figure was gone.
And they told their mother about it?
Straight away. Told her everything about the horrifying thing they saw and felt. And here's where it gets even more intense. The mother didn't just comfort them or dismiss it.
Nah.
She confirmed it. Shockingly, she said she saw it too. Only for a brief moment, but she saw it.
She saw the same figure.
Yes. And that brief glimpse was enough for her to recognize who it was. Someone the father knew. Someone who just recently died. The person whose funeral the father had just come back from that night.
Okay, so the connection is direct. The funeral, the deceased person, the father.
Exactly. And the mother shared more about her side of it. She said she felt the child's body go stiff, heard distress noises while they were supposedly asleep.
What else did she experience?
When she woke up fully, she was hit by this incredibly strong, disgusting smell filling the room.
What kind of smell?
Like decomposing flesh or pus. Just a really foul odor.
And could she move? Could she help physically?
She described feeling unable to physically intervene, maybe a similar kind of paralysis or overwhelming presence that the child felt.
So what did she do?
She closed her eyes and prayed. Specifically prayed to a highly respected monk she revered, Luang Pu Thuat. Asked him for help, for protection for her child.
Luang Pu Thuat, he's a very significant figure in Thai Buddhism, right? Known for protection.
Very much so. See, the powerful protector, people often wear his amulets. Praying to him for safeguarding is common.
Did she do anything else?
She also mentally spoke to the spirit, told it to let go, to stop creating bad karma by harming them.
And what happened then, from her perspective?
She described hearing a soft, elderly male voice. The implication is that it was Luang Pu Thuat.
What did the voice say?
Something like, let go, don't create karma.
And after she heard that...
Everything went back to normal. The child's body relaxed, their breathing became normal again. It lines up perfectly with when the child said the vision ended.
So the mother's account kind of explains who it was and the funeral connection.
Right. But for the narrator, questions still remained. Why step on their chest if the anger was towards the father?
Yeah, that part is strange. Why involve the child physically like that?
And how did the spirit even get into the house? Those points weren't really resolved in the story.
It's fascinating, though, how both of them experienced parts of it and how the mother's prayers seem to be the key.
It definitely adds layers to the account. And this whole sequence of events had some significant long-term impacts described in the narrative.
Like with the father.
Yes.
Yeah.
Apparently, sometime later, a wandering monk saw the father and told him he looked unwell. Warned him he might die young if he didn't change his path.
Really? A direct warning like that?
That's what the account says. And prompted by that, and maybe everything else that had happened, the father made a huge life change.
What did he do?
He decided to ordain as a Buddhist monk. And according to the source, he's remained a monk ever since, for many years now.
Wow. And what about the narrator, the child? What were the lasting effects for them?
Their reality seems to have fundamentally shifted after that first encounter and the ritual at the mediums.
How so?
The source states that from that point on, they started seeing and experiencing supernatural things frequently.
So it wasn't just a one-off event?
No. The narrator suggests that the Krabskeng ritual, the headpiece thing, somehow opened their world or ramped up their sensitivity to this stuff.
Even though there were those earlier prophecies about them having a destiny with spirit.
Right. It raises that question. Did the ritual activate something that was already there? Or did it create a new sensitivity? Or maybe both?
The narrator who shared the story also added some extra thoughts, didn't they?
They did. They really emphasized how terrifying that image must have been. The bloated figure stepping on someone.
And they shared another short story.
Yeah, a brief anecdote from a friend. Apparently, this friend's car was followed home by the spirit of a junior colleague after the colleague's funeral.
Just reinforcing that idea that spirits might attach themselves to people after funeral.
Within that belief system, yes.
Yeah.
And based on that, the narrator included some warnings for listeners.
Like what?
Like, if you think you see a spirit, don't verbally acknowledge it. The idea is they might not realize they're dead and could follow you out of confusion.
Okay.
What else? A specific warning about funerals. Don't, verbally offer the deceased spirit a ride home. That could be seen as an invitation.
Right. Anything else?
One more. If a friend visits late at night, check their feet. If they seem to be floating slightly off the ground, the belief is it's their spirit. The advice is to say, go back, and maybe offer a short prayer, like Nemo. This is thought to help the spirit realize they've passed on.
Interesting cultural beliefs and advice there. But the core mystery of the narrator's own story
Remains unsolved. Why them? Why step on the child's chest while looking angrily at the father?
And since the father became a monk, he hasn't really explained his side or perspective.
Exactly. So it leaves us with this powerful personal story, deeply tied to experience and cultural beliefs, full of events that really challenge easy explanation.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? We've traced this really remarkable, kind of unsettling journey, haven't we?
Absolutely. From an illness science couldn't fix to this turn towards a spirit medium, the strange ritual.
Then the instantaneous recovery, which is just baffling.
Followed by that truly terrifying first supernatural encounter. An encounter that seemed to cement belief and maybe even, according to the narrator, change their connection to the spirit world permanently.
Thinking about you, the listener, this story really pushes us to consider the edges of what we think we understand, doesn't it? When conventional explanations fall short.
It highlights the incredible power of belief, too. You see the mother shifting from skepticism, the father deepening his faith into monkhood.
And it brings up these big questions about things like karma, spiritual protection, how different people seek it, and maybe even about the nature of these kinds of interventions.
Right. If you seek help from these alternative or spiritual sources, even if it solves one problem, like the illness,
could there be other consequences? Unseen risks? Did that ritual, as the narrator suggests, open a door that brought other experiences, maybe frightening ones?
What really stands out to you when you hear this account is that the recovery, the sheer horror of that vision.
Or maybe the mother's role, her prayer seemingly resolving the immediate crisis.
It makes you wonder, if that ritual did increase sensitivity, is there sometimes a trade-off? Physical healing, but maybe at the cost of experiencing a reality that's, well, potentially more frightening.
A lot to think about there. This incredible story, as we mentioned, was shared as a personal account on the Canito Horror Docs YouTube channel.
Definitely worth checking out if you want the original source. And hey, while you're thinking about it, maybe give our channel a like, share, or subscribe if you enjoy these deep dives.
Yeah, we appreciate the support. Until next time, keep an open mind. Consider the mysteries out there, the vast range of human experience and belief that sometimes goes way beyond our everyday.